Welcome back to the pit. This is the third episode of Talk Bold Action. In this episode, we finally catch up with the latest Warlord Games releases about the news on the upcoming third edition of the game. In particular, in this episode, we will discuss some of the news about special rules and vehicles. Starting with special rules, of course, we know that special rules are an important part of every game because they are what is used to make units stand out from each other. You have, of course, equipment, but most of the time is special rules that gives a unit their flair, so to speak. So far, Warlords have released 3 different special units, and we will right away start discussing them. The first one that we briefly touched upon in a previous podcast is engineers. The engineers special rule means that the unit with this rule is allowed to charge a building, to assault a unit in a building, without giving the enemy the benefit of the defensive position bonus. So, what is the defensive position bonus? We don't know yet. In second edition, it basically meant that the unit that was assaulting doesn't get to strike first, but the combat, a close combat, is simultaneous, so combat losses are taken at the same time by both attacker and defender. In third edition, we know already that much has changed, that cover has changed, and again, it's too early to know what implications will defensive position, occupying a defensive position will have. Remember that in third edition you can have an engineer platoon. We discussed that in the first episode of the podcast. Again, with just the single information is too early to say whether this change will be necessary, important, or whatever. We will have to see. In addition of the bonus to to assault, engineers have advantages when it comes to minefields and other fortification, which, in my personal experience, is something more niche that doesn't interest most players at all, probably. But again, knowing that you can assault a building and still get to strike first, which makes sense from a logic point of view, of course makes engineers a very solid choice if you happen to fight in an urban area, or generally speaking a building heavy setup. But again, only time will tell. The second special rule is a special rule, I'll be honest, I really loathe. The special rule is called Fieldcraft, and basically sums up what in second edition were all the special rules that allowed a unit to traverse rough terrain as it was clear terrain. So the units with this special rule, again, are allowed to treat rough ground as open ground. I don't like it one bit. I didn't like it in second edition. The problem there was with the Mountaineers rule, even though it had different iteration in different books, but that's another matter. Why I don't like this rule? Because at least in second edition games, having to traverse rough terrain was a very important part in your tactical planning, because having a rough ground gave you cover, it limited your mobility, but it also allowed for a nice defensive position, because if the enemy wanted to charge you through rough ground, you always counted as defending basically a defended position. So the attacker wasn't allowed to strike first. And having a rule that completely removes a section, another section of the rule book, it doesn't make any sense to me. I think such a rule cheapens strategic depth of the game. It might be too early to tell. Maybe they done great work balancing it. It may be. I trust Warlord Games, but just by instinct, I don't like this kind of rule, because it's like cheating in a way, because it gives you too much freedom of movement, and again, having to deal with the difficulties of moving through cover was a very important part in the second edition battles. Bah, I don't know. We will see, but I don't like the concept of allowing you to ignore a rule as important as that of moving through rough ground, through cover. The third rule that Warlords wanted to share with us, the public, is anti-tank gun. Anti-tank gun basically means that if the vehicle that is armed with an anti-tank gun, whether it's a vehicle like a tank, through the small tanks with light 80 guns, through behemoths with super heavy anti-tank guns, it also it's a rule that applies to artillery units, anti-tank units, like guns, like field guns. So any unit with an anti-tank gun get a +1 modifier to hit when shooting with a fire order, whether it's a direct fire order or as a consequence of an ambush dice being turned into a fire since the ambush is sprung. What do we think of this rule? Of course, this rule basically follows the fact that in 3rd edition, as we saw on the last podcast, the new basic to hit roll is a 4+. So everything this rule does is giving more sense, give more incentives to field anti-tank guns that, as far as field guns were concerned, didn't see a great use in 2nd edition, again in my personal experience. And it gives tanks something to do with their big guns, because even in 2nd edition, having a super heavy anti-tank gun on your big tank most of the times meant that you would miss. Of course, if you hit, you would do catastrophic damage, possibly, but most of the time it was, you roll a single dice. It can go well, it can go wrong. If the target was in cover, if you had moved, all the minuses meant that it was really a stroke of luck if your anti-tank gun managed to hit a target at all during the battle. Of course, now in the 3rd edition, it seems that on overall it will be easier to hit targets. Again, think of the modifications to the to hit roll table that we saw in the second episode of this podcast, because there is no more penalties for shooting at long range. And now it's the we see the introduction of the cover system, which means that when in second edition you had troubles hitting a target due to a -2 to hit for a heavy cover, now cover, remember, gives you a sort of a ward save. Having a ward save doesn't mean that it won't be easier to hit you. It's quite complicated. I guess they made their calculations. It cannot be anything else but this. So okay, a nice rule, which means that field guns will likely go in ambush, as they were wont to do most of the time anyway. And for tanks themselves, well, again, if they advance, they still get the penalty for moving. They don't get the to hit bonus. I don't know. We will see, but it doesn't seem to me it's a rule that will make too much of a difference. You know, it's like a nice bonus, but nothing decisive. Okay, before moving on to vehicles and the news, some of the news on vehicles are rather interesting. A little tidbit, a little piece of information that wasn't officially released on Warlord Games webpage on last Wednesday, but basically it comes from the Warlord Games store, because if you wanted to buy some of the new Italian miniatures, you basically could find some additional informations. The information are as follow. For howitzers, we know that basically we'll ignore cover saves, which only makes sense. It's just like saying that in second edition indirect weapons basically ignores to hit modifiers, as they always hit on a 6 plus eventual ranging in ENG time. Mortars, again, they ignore cover. Again, it only makes sense, because if you lob a shell behind the cover, there's no way that the cover itself is going to save you. They cause a 2-inch HE blast. That is what happened with medium mortars in second edition. We know for a fact that small that light mortars still exist in third, so I guess these 2-inch HE blast is referring to a medium mortar as it was before. Again, nothing big. The third little snippet of information, the last piece of information, is about snipers. Bolt action snipers are accurate. We don't know if this will mean that they will have a to hit bonus, because as it is the base to hit bonus, we already said that is a 4+. In second edition, snipers ignored all negative to hit modifiers, except for pin markers on them and the -1 for not having the observer, if the observer was dead. They can deny the targets the benefits of cover. Again, makes sense. If you shoot with your optic, you just ignore that, and pick out enemy squad leaders and NCOs from within a squad. Remember, the Warlords already said that they removed the exceptional damage rule, which is the rule that allowed snipers in second edition to pick out the enemy models that were killed in a unit. I guess what this will mean is that snipers will just get to pick the model they want, as they did before. It won't be called exceptional damage. It will be called like crack shot, or I don't know, whatever letters. It won't change. It won't change much. All right, now it's time to move to vehicles. Vehicles, of course, are an important part of bolt action, both as regards to transport vehicles and armored vehicles. The first change is the introduction of a specific damage table for armored vehicles. Then again, I'm sorry, before going into this, allow me to say one more thing that they released, and that is what happens when you shoot at an unarmored vehicle, like for example a poor unarmed and unarmored transport vehicle, or for example a jeep, or a Kubelwagen, or you know, a 6 plus vehicle, armor value vehicle. What happened in second edition is that if you roll to hit, if you hit a vehicle with a 6 plus damage value, you got your 6. It didn't mean that the vehicle exploded immediately in a great ball of fire. It meant that you still had to roll on the vehicle damage table, and then you saw what would happen. The vehicle damage table basically sums up to you have a 50% chance of knocking out the vehicle outright, and with the remainder 50%, you either immobilized it, stunned it, or basically put it on fire. Now in third edition they made things simpler. You hit a 6 plus damage value vehicle, you damage it, it is destroyed. So that is bad news for all light transports, basically motorbikes, jeeps, Kubelwagens, and the like. Okay, it strips away some of the resilience that super light vehicles, unarmored vehicles had. Okay, if so they say it's what it's going to be. What did they change? We've started to talk about this before. Is they introduced a second damage table for superficial damage. In second edition, as you well know, at least if you already happen to play second edition bolt action, if you glanced an enemy vehicle, which means if your to wound roll, so to say, is exactly equal to the damage value of the opponent, for example, for a light vehicle, for a 7 plus armored vehicle, you roll the 7, 8 for a light tank, 9 for a medium tank, and so on. If you roll exactly that number, you still rolled on the only one and only vehicle damage table that existed. Only you gave a -3 on the roll, so which usually meant that only with a 6 you had a hope of knocking out the vehicle outright, because it was a 6 minus 3. The result of 3 was a fire, and with fire you had to roll a morale check for the vehicle crew to see if they managed to put out the fire in time, or if they abandoned the vehicle. So they introduced this new table that you roll on if you glance an enemy vehicle. The concept is similar to the old one. What changes? They basically introduced some kind of gradual debuffs you apply with glancing hits. Like for example, if you roll a 2, the vehicle can make one less pivot when moving. If you roll a 4, the vehicle becomes a slow vehicle. Usually tracked vehicles will move at 9-inch speed. If you are slow, you only move at 6 inches speed for an advanced order. Okay, I don't see this as a really big game-changing change. Excuse me, pardon the pun. Probably it's just a tad more bookkeeping if you have to keep track of damages that aren't a vehicle destroyed or immobilized, but I don't think it will make too much of a difference. Then we have the full damage table. This is basically the same as the old one, so we have a 50% chance of knocking out the vehicle immediately. You have 1/3 chances of stunning the crew, 1/3 of immobilizing the vehicle, and 1/3 of putting the vehicle on fire, which again means that you have to take a morale check for the tank crew, and if they fail the check, the vehicle is abandoned and counts as destroyed. Okay, it's I don't know. I don't find this change particularly interesting or exciting, but okay, let's see what that will mean. But again, I don't think it will make too much of a difference. What will make a bigger impact on the game and how you build a list is the one change at least, to transport vehicles. What was one rule in second edition that maybe not all players always remember to use, was that of enemy proximity. In second edition, if your transport vehicle, any kind of transport vehicle, ended a combat round with enemy units that weren't other empty transport closer to them than friendly non-empty transport units, your vehicle was destroyed, because the crew said that, okay, we are not here to fight, we were just here to give our units a lift. We did that, we are not fighting units, we will bug out, bye bye. Now, in third edition, again, if you are an armored transport, a good old 6+ damage value transport, it doesn't change anything. You're closer to the enemy than to friends, you get destroyed at the end of the turn. What changes, and this is a big change, is if you are an armored transport, like this Bren carrier, for example. Because what does the new rule says? The new rule says that armored transport are at risk of abandoning the battlefield if they end up closest to enemies than to friends, but only if they fail a morale check. Why? This is huge. You know, one good thing in second edition was using your empty transport vehicles as a sort of weapons platforms, because often you could mount like medium machine guns and like on vehicles to provide some additional fire support for your units. or if you didn't shell out the points for armament on transports, once they delivered the cargo, they were basically useless. So you try to prevent the loss of the order dice easily, but or even use them as mobile cover, keeping them slowly always in front of your own troopers advancing, like a sort of a shield wall, so to say. The fact that now armored transports don't automatically leave the field, of course, give them both more staying power and more strategic possibility, because now you can, let's say, reliably, it will always depend on the roll of the dice, but now if you have even on a normal regular vehicle, if they don't change morale values, and we don't know this yet for sure, you know that a 9 plus in a 9 sorry less than a 9 on 2 dice is as reliable as it gets when playing bolt action. So it will basically sort of encourage players to field armored transport, which in second edition wasn't always the case. For example, think of M3 half tracks or Hanomags. They actually they did cost quite a lot of money, and with the open topped special rule that in third edition we don't know how it will work exactly, but in second edition they were still very vulnerable to small arms fire, so they weren't very cost effective. The point of this change, I guess, it is to encourage the usage of armored transport, or at least giving them more sense. What they did on overall, this is what Warlords said in the article, it's not my imagination, that they are going to do a general points cost overhaul for vehicles in third edition, and they gave the example of a Panzer 6 Tiger II or König Tiger in second edition. To field a veteran of these bad boys meant you had to shell like 666 points or something around that, which again in turn meant that basically you were either playing a tank war game with lots of tanks and possibly lots of points to choose from, or in a normal 1000 points game there was literally no point for you to bring out the biggest cat out there. Now in third edition, the same vehicle will cost, for a veteran vehicle, it will cost 528 points. They cut like 130 points from second edition. Will this mean that we will see many big cats prowling around? I don't know, I still doubt it. And overall on point costs for tanks is welcome, because you many times you had these beautiful models. They were very cool, they have big guns, but they cost too much. Again, I see why they would want to see heavier tanks be more on the field than they used to. Much will depend on whether they manage to get a nice balance between points costs, effectiveness, and that's the hard part of being a game designer, I guess. I don't know, we will see. So that's it for today. We saw some nice, interesting changes. Next Wednesday, probably we will hear something about troop quality and morale, and that's something I very, very much look forward to. Well, we will see what the guys at Warlords have in store. Until that time, I thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, consider subscribing, leaving a comment, a like, all the stuff you already know. Until the time, stay safe, bye bye, ciao ciao.